Hello, guys. Welcome back to episode 3 of our Secure AI series. You are all very welcome. And again, I really hope that you learned something new from this video. And it's an exciting video as well because today is the final video about our base classifiers. Okay, so we talked about sits, we talked about trainables or trainable classifiers, and now we're going to talk about EDMs. Okay, and we're going to wrap this up very, very nicely in terms of how to distinguish them and when you might need to use them. Okay. EDM is probably my favorite form of the classifiers in terms of accuracy because, as it says in the name, it's an exact data match, right? So you're matching it against your exact records, against your structured data. And it's a very, very nice way to ensure almost 100% true positive rate. As I said before with the Trainable's video, we're never going to get to 100%, okay? But this is definitely the most effective way to get as close as we can to that number. So with that being said, as before, what is an EDM? Why do they matter? How do we actually use them? And then we're going to do a very, very brief CDX demo. A bit of a note, this session, when it comes to the CDX demo, we're going to make the schema, okay? But and then in terms of uploading it and hashing it and making a different security group, we're going to do that in a different video, just because conscious the point of this episode is that it is about fundamentals, okay? And it is about understanding the technology, okay? So I don't want to overwhelm people with bringing them through and downloading the agent and whatnot, okay? So again, the point of this video is that you understand an EDM, you understand the basics of it, how you can make the schema in Purview, and then as we progress through the series, we'll start to have a bit more fun. So with that being said, what is a data an exact data match, right? So it's a fingerprint based detection. Okay, so it basically, when you're looking at your sensitive data like employee IDs or bank details or anything that you want to make into a unique hash, right? You create a secure fingerprint for each record, right? And it enables sort of precise matching. Okay, so when we're looking at a hash is a really, really nice way of cryptography because it allows us to verify the data later, right? And we can still view it in a very secure way. Okay, and moving on to the actual technology behind an EDM, we're looking at hashing, tokenization, and matching the actual algorithm, right, to compare the data against if it's uploaded against a pre-hash source file. It basically ensures that it's only exact verified values trigger a match. Okay, and that's how we get really good true positives. Okay, using an EDM, and to kind of top it off for your data sets, when you look at unstructured or structured data sets are what works best. Okay, so your payroll lists just as one example. Okay, but it allows Purview to detect exact matches across your various technologies, whether it's email, Teams, or SharePoint. Okay, and EDM, a nice kind of way to sum it up, right? It ensures the protection is enabled only when the data is proven. Okay, so you have to prove the data to Purview, right? And hence why it's called an exact data match. And why should we care? Well, precision, precision, precision. Okay. The thing about an EDM, right, is that it eliminates the guesswork. Okay. So it only matches based off verified hashed records, right? And that's why we can see that the false positives are reduced to near zero. Okay. So data integrity, it's at its peak. Okay. So when we are linking protection policies to real source data, right, the point of an exact data match is that we ensure that only authenticity and approved values trigger, right, security actions, right? So when your security team or your SOC team are getting alerts, right, whether it be in Purview or whether it be in the Defender XDR portal, which again can feed into Purview, right? You can get those alerts in either one or. It's an exact match, right? We're not doing any guesswork, okay? And I guess in the spirit of comedy, right? But I guess this is a reality as well. They do stop them as the mistakes that a lot of people do get fired for, right? Or a lot of companies do get sued for, right? And an example, just again going back to the payroll because it's the most simple one to use, whether a payroll sheet or customer list ends up in the wrong inbox, okay? And that's where an EDM can sort of quietly save the day because we can get that structured data, we can hash it, we can make a schema, and we can get Purview to protect that very specific data. Okay, so it's very, very, very powerful and it's very, very useful as well. Again, going back to that true positives and false positives argument, like I guess the point of the classifier, whether it be a SIT, a trainable, or an EDM, is that we try and get to a place of very, very high true positives. And how do we use them? Okay, at a very, very high level, right? You need to prepare and hash your data, right? You upload it to the schema, and then we can deploy it into our DLP policies. Yes, we have to download an agent. Yes, we have to make a security group. But again, we will talk about that, and we'll be doing live demonstrations as the series progresses. But just follow these 3 steps and understand the concept of these 3 steps as well, and you'll be very, very good to go. Okay. The most difficult one, I would say, for a lot of people is preparing the data, right? And allowing your data or allowing a structured data set, right? Such as employee records or customer IDs to be exported, right? And then you can hash it locally in the uploading agent, right? And then once it's uploaded and once it's hashed into Purview, right, we can define it with columns, represent unique identifiers, and map them to any EDM configuration that you have. And then obviously then we can deploy them into our DLP policies, our labeling policies, however we want to move it. And finally, just a nice wrap up, okay? Because obviously we're on episode 3 now. What we can take away from this video is that when we're looking at episode 1, SITs find the patterns, trainables or trainable classifiers find the meaning, and EDMs find the proof, right? They find the proof in the pudding. And these are nice kind of phrases that you can take away and you can, regurgitate, or you can tell people, or you can even help your own understanding in terms of what to use, when to use it, right? And how they can all link together, okay? Because each of these classifiers, while they are all amazing at, certain different things, right? A SIT isn't going to be used for a structured data set, right? And an EDM isn't going to be used to find, a pattern logic that you're looking to configure. Now, we use SITs in EDMs, which we're going to see in a CDX demo, okay? So it's really important to understand that all of this technology works together, right? And I really want to emphasize that in videos and this sort of training session, because what Microsoft are doing and what most tech giants are doing as well is that they're trying to link all of their technology together so that people can have a cohesive approach, right? We're not trying to silo everything and, you do one configuration here and it doesn't feed into another configuration there and it just slows everything down. So the way to look at this technology and the way to look at security in general from Microsoft perspective, because again, that's my background, is that it's all one hive mind, okay? That's how I would describe it. Now, speaking of a hive mind, we're going to hop into our trusty CDX demo. And again, I already have the portal open, right, in our data loss prevention portal, and underneath classifiers, again, you can type it up here, classifiers, and find it as well. But we're in the EDM experience, okay? Now, what we're going to do, we're going to make an EDM classifier. And when we first hit this, you guys will probably get this as well, right? Microsoft actually give you a step-by-step guide in terms of the prerequisites that we need, right? So again, what I said before in the presentation, discover and prepare your sensitive data, okay? So before you make your EDM classifier, prepare 2 files, only one's required, right? But it's just good to have a second one. And then the actual file containing the sensitive data that your classifier wants to detect, okay? So if you want to detect your, patient records or payroll numbers, whatever it might be, the file will contain your patient ID or the name or the payroll number. Okay, and then you have a similar file, right, with sample data that can be used when creating your EDM classifier as well. We're moving on to the next step. Okay, and this is where we make it in the compliance portal, which I'm going to show you now. Okay, and then obviously we move outside the compliance portal and making a security group, which we'll talk about at the end of this YouTube video. So follow these steps, right? Understand why you're doing each of these steps. And of course, if you have any questions, you can email me, you can DM me on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to answer them to the best of my ability. But Microsoft do a very, very good job at guiding people through, the EDM process, because they can be quite intimidating, right? And they can be quite confusing for a lot of people, right? Hence why I guess they're so effective, right? But it is a bit of a learning curve. But again, what we're going to try and do is make it as simple as possible, understand the fundamentals, and go from there. So what we'll do is we'll create our EDM classifier, and we'll call this, let's just call this test data for now, right? Keep it nice and simple. Test data. We have to give a description, right? Because it is an exact data match. So we'll just say patient records, sicknesses, PPS numbers, etc. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. You can upload whatever name you want to as well, or call it whatever name you want to. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to keep it very, very basic and very, very high level. So there's 2 ways we can do this, okay? I always go with the recommended one because we have sample data, okay? We can upload that data as well, and it's going to be very, very easier. You can manually, define your data structure, but you will have to name fields and you'll have to choose different sensitive types that match them, and it will just take you a lot longer, okay? So as in the recommendation for myself and also from Microsoft, which we saw when we were going to make our EDM classifier, prepare your data, okay? Prepare it in a way so that you can just upload it to Purview, and that does all the heavy lifting, okay? So we're going to go next here. Right, so I'm just going to upload my file. So we're going to wait now until it just analyzes the file, make sure that we've prepared our data correctly. If you haven't prepared your data correctly, Purview will tell you, right? So you'll get an error, right, saying whatever the reason is, like you need to fix this column or do whatever. So just keep that in mind. So we have our full name, email logins, PPS numbers, IBAN numbers, address info, medical condition. Again, this is a very, very generic high level file. Okay, this is random data, guys. Okay, this isn't going to be, for your organization, you're going to have a very specific use case. So what we expect here is that it's going to have some full matches. It's going to have some partial matches as well. Okay, and I'll explain what that means when we move on. So as expected, right, full names, full match, which is quite common, right, because they're full names. We have PPS numbers, right, which are partial matches. We have IBAN numbers, which are partial matches. Address info, medical conditions, which are full matches. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with this. So if we have a look at, the eye of wisdom here, we can see the sample data that was in the Excel file that I uploaded and the matching results. Okay, same with address info, right? So just random addresses put in. That's great. So the IBAN numbers and the PPS numbers, right? Why aren't these matching? Well, the first thing that stands out to me for PPS numbers is that the match mode, this is the EU national identification, right? So this is actually the incorrect SIT, right, that Purview have put in, right? So that's why we have a partial match here. Now, again, we could have one match or two matches, but then these here, right, aren't matching. So what we need to do is we need to change the sensitive info type to PPS numbers. We need to change the sensitive info type to whatever we think it should be matching in our sample data. Remember, it could be custom ones as well. It doesn't need to be PPS numbers, right? And then we can decide, okay, how many matches are we getting? Are we happy with this data? Okay. So again, some of the data won't match the sensitive info type, and there's reasons that it could be incorrect sample data, right? Or the sensitive info type might be included for different keywords of evidence. There's lots of reasons why. Okay, so it's up to us, again, going back to episode 1, to understand what our SIT does. If we need to make a regex, if we need to make a custom SIT, if we need to get a bit more, creative with the process, right, in terms of how we make our SITs. And that's how it feeds into our EDMs. Okay, so a big takeaway that a lot that I sort of say, I think I said it in episode 1 as well, is that there's no point talking about DLP. There's no point talking about EDMs. There's no point talking about any of these really advanced classifiers. We don't know what a SIT is. We don't know what the fundamentals are, because we'd look at this and we go, well, okay, there's a partial match here, but I don't know what I'm meant to do, or like, what is this, right? So we understand why we're getting this error, and we understand how to fix it. Okay, I'm not going to do it in this video because we would be here for 2 hours at minimum. So what I'll do is I'll just pick on one that's, just do medical condition, right, diseases, as an example, right? So we're going to choose the fields that contain the main, sense information that we're trying to detect, right? And we're going to identify it as a primary element, right? So in this test data, we're looking for medical conditions, right? We're looking for diseases, right? And I'm happy with this as well because we have a full match here, right? It's brilliant, right? It's we've no issues, no errors, right? So we can, with full confidence, choose this as the primary element, right? And we can hit next on this. So again, this is pretty much just, when we're configuring our data and our selective columns, a lot of this is pretty self-explanatory. So do we want to have the same setting for all columns? I usually put this as yes. Does the data in the columns, do we care if it's case sensitive or insensitive? I just leave it as case insensitive because it's easier, whether it's in capitals or non-capitals. And you can ignore delimiters and punctuation for data in columns as well. Again, this is just your commas, your whatever might be in between the data. You can decide if you want to ignore it or not. I'm just going to leave it as default for now. Okay, so we are going to configure detection rules for our primary elements. Okay, so you can have up to 3 rules, right? So each one has a unique confidence level that sort of helps us determine how likely that SIT is going to be detected with our EDMs, right? So confidence, it will typically increase with the more supporting elements that are detected, that are within close proximity as well to the primary elements. What that means essentially is when we're looking at medical conditions, right, we want to look at PPS numbers because we're Irish, right, or I'm Irish. So PPS number is just a unique identifier. Everyone will have a different unique identifier. Your social security number, your Belgian national number, whatever it may be, right? Just think about how it can link up to your primary element. Because again, remember in episode 1 when we looked at SITs, right? If I have a username or a password, my primary element is my username and my supporting element is my password, or vice versa, right? They're there to complement each other, right? So we add supporting elements and character proximity for high and medium confidence rules, right? So that's something to really take note of, right? So an example would be medical condition. So if for high confidence, what am I highly confident with a medical condition, right? I want my full name. I don't really care too much about the email login. I'll do my full name, a PPS number, and address info, right? So when we think about a medical condition and we're thinking about how that looks on a patient record, we typically have our full name, an identifier, and where that patient is from, right? Medium confidence, then it always has to be lower or higher than the high confidence one in terms of how confident we are that if I have this in proximity to my medical condition, how how confident are we that it's going to pull back our results, right? So we don't want to replicate what we have up here. So we can get rid of full name, PPS, address info. So again, address and PPS. Okay, and we just have email and IBAN number as well. Okay, so you can decide, you can add as many or as little as you want. You will only have access to your columns, and again, this is why it's so important to prepare your data, right? So when it comes to, I can only decide if I want to add an email login or IBAN number. Okay, so this is different than having a full list of stats to choose from. And again, this is where the EDM play comes into play. We're working off the data that we're using, right? Exact data matches. Okay, so it's really important that you prepare your data, right, and you get ready for Purview to ingest that data as well. So what I've decided to do is I've decided to delete the medium confidence ones because I just want this to be a high confidence one, and I'm highly confident that if it has a full name, a PPS number, and address info in it, that we're going to get good results back. Okay, again, we can add medium confidence, low confidence, whatever we want to do. It's really up to yourself. So for now, we're just going to delete this, and we're going to save, right? And if we go next here, right, so we can review and finish settings. Okay, so this is, again, making the actual EDM classifier in Purview. Okay, so when we submit this, right, we should get a nice green tick saying that everything is okay. All right, brilliant, right? So we have the actual succession here, right? So we have the classifier, and then we need to put it to work, right? And we can use the EDM upload agent tool then to hash and upload that data, okay? Which again, we won't do in this demonstration because again, we'll be here for a while. But what I wanted to show you, right? So after we've made this EDM classifier, right, is that Microsoft have really, really nice documentation, kind of summing up what I've said in terms of bits and pieces, but how to move on and how to move on to the next step for your EDM, right? And again, we'll be exploring more YouTube videos about this, right, in terms of how to hash and upload your sensitive information and source it from a table as well. Okay, so this is a really, really nice documentation. You can follow it. It gives you all the prerequisites that you might need as well. So guys, thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope you found it useful, and more importantly, I hope you learned something new. So the purpose of these videos, again, for a secure AI series is that we can understand the technology behind our security processes, like our DLP, like our auto labeling policies. So please stay tuned for next week, where we will be talking about DLP, right, and how we can use it to protect technologies such as Exchange, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.